I would suggest is strategically a questionable commitment.
Ambassador Sherman, you, having served with President Clinton, know how effective political opponents can be when a president takes on an issue as large as this. We've already heard from Senator McCain, who said the president should not have announced an exit time. How do you see the politics of this breaking out?
Well, it's very interesting. Your caller asked about won't we just extend the timeline? I think it's very interesting. The president made the exit date or the beginning of an exit before his reelection. He could have made the date the January following his reelection, but he basically is also saying to the American people, you can hold me to this. I am putting my political future on the line because I have chosen a date that I think is right for building our own nation and for moving ahead. So I give him credit. He's holding his own feet to the fire.
Ambassador Wendy Sherman, she served as special advisor to President Clinton. She's currently vice chair of the Albright Stonebridge Group. Short break and right back.
National broadcast of the Diane Rehm Show is made possible in part by the Wallace Foundation, a source of ideas for expanding learning opportunities beyond the school day at wallacefoundation.org. By the George Lucas Educational Foundation, creator of Edutopia, your source for what works in public education. Learn more at edutopia.org. And by the Doris Duke Charitable Foundation, supporting the performing arts, environmental conservation, medical research, and the prevention of child abuse. This is NPR.
Women in Science, two Nobel Prize winners, and the President's Director of Domestic Policy discussed challenges and opportunities for women in science and math. The Diane Rehm Show, next hour. And welcome back. Colonel Douglas Macgregor is U.S. Army retired. He's the author of a new book titled Warrior's Rage, The Great Tank Battle of 73 Easting. I want to ask you, Colonel Macgregor, about that title, Warrior's Rage. Tell me where it comes from.
Well, it's really frustration with our failure in 1991 to accomplish the mission that we had been assigned, which was to capture or destroy the Republican Guard Corps and prevent its escape. And this is a story about some very courageous and competent soldiers, sergeants, lieutenants, and captains who gave everything they had and won a terrific victory against a much larger force, and it was all for naught, because the generals and the colonels were remote from the scene of the action, refused to exploit the opportunity, and as a result, we were held back and simply watched as the Republican Guard Corps left.
Ambassador Sherman, could we have somehow captured Osama bin Laden? And had we done so, would we be in an entirely different situation today regarding Afghanistan?
Well, as you know, the Senate Foreign Relations Committee just issued a report about that famous Tora Bora incident in 2001 and come to the conclusion that indeed we could have captured Osama bin Laden, and it was because Secretary Rumsfeld and Vice President Cheney were not willing to commit the forces necessary to do the job and to cut Osama bin Laden off from escape. Would that have changed the entire situation? We all will never know, but it certainly would have changed quite a bit. And it would have changed quite a bit, quite frankly, for the Bush administration had they been successful. I don't yet understand why that decision was made, and I think we all should regret that it was.
Colonel Macgregor.
Well, that's not the whole story. The entire story is that General Franks was urged by Rumsfeld to look at troops that might be available, conventional troops that could supplement the special operations forces on the ground. And they were looking at 2 brigades, primarily from the 82nd Airborne Division, which were ready and available. And it was General McNeil, the 18th Airborne Corps commander, backed by General Shinseki, who was then Chief of Staff of the Army, who said, oh no. it'll take us at least 6 months to deploy the entire 18th Airborne Corps. And of course, the argument was we don't need the entire 18th Airborne Corps. We simply need 2 brigades. And they said absolutely out of the question. And it was at that point that Secretary Rumsfeld turned to General Retired Wayne Downing, who had commanded Special Operations Command, who then outlined a different strategy using Special Operations Forces. There were many, many opportunities and many missteps. General Wald, who was in the Combined Air Operations Center at the time, called Franks, alerting him in November to the departure from Kabul of a convoy of white SUVs. And our intelligence agencies told him that they were 90% certain that Osama bin Laden, along with Mullah Muhammad and a host of other al-Qaeda types, were actually in this convoy, and he requested permission to use the Predator and strike it. And at the time, General Franks said, no, I have to consult my attorney and see whether or not these rules of engagement are appropriate. And of course, an hour later, he called back and said, you have permission to engage. And at that point, they were gone. We've had several missteps. And you're right. If we had captured or killed Osama bin Laden and his inner circle, I don't think we would be talking very much about what's happening over there today. And I think that goes back to what Ambassador Haas said. He raised those 2 questions. I think the answers to both of them are no and no.
All right, let's go now to Raleigh, North Carolina. Good morning, Neil. You're on the air.
Hi, Diane. Just a quick comment. I think normally I would believe that the amount of dissatisfaction with the president's speech from all sides would be a good indication that this is probably a pretty good policy. I am very, I guess, pragmatic about this and concerned that creating a Afghan police force and military to the tune of, probably a couple of 100,000 guys, whether or not that's going to be sustainable in a country like Afghanistan. I mean, they can't afford what they have now. We're building a lot of infrastructure today, but what industry, what economy is going to maintain this military force moving forward?
Michael O'Hanlon.
Well, it's a very valid question, but I would argue it's a secondary question because we have ways to handle this. We can essentially continue to provide security aid to Afghanistan for a long time to come. And compared to the amount of money we're spending now on the battlefield, that's going to be $100 billion a year. Spending $2 or $3 or $4 billion a year indefinitely, the way we help support Egypt and Israel and other such countries in the past, I think is a reasonable kind of option. If we can get to that point, that's a much happier world than we're in today.
Michael,
like
what kinds of assurances do we know we've received from President Karzai? I know that President Obama had a long conversation with him on the 30th of November. What do we know about that?
I don't believe we know a lot because words don't mean that much at this point in the debate. It's easy to say I have this and that anti-corruption agenda and I'm going to use the following criteria to award contracts or to hire future ministers, but you have to see what happens in practice. And along those lines, I would say that while I share the concerns of everyone here today about Karzai's corruption and the problems with his government, there are some signs of hopefulness. He has a fairly good Minister of Interior, a fairly good Minister of Defense, a fairly good Minister of Finance, all of whom he appointed. There's a fairly good governor now in Helmand province, and there's worry that